Hey y'all, it's Nikki Winston from the Winston CPA Group, and I am back with my friend Erin Daver from Well Balanced Accountants.
Hi, everybody.
And we are on part three of the CPA exam Q&A, just really sharing all of the tips and strategies and tricks that work for us as we embarked on the CPA exam journey. So we realized that there are a lot of you who are currently where we were, and we get it. We understand that it's a struggle and that it takes support and motivation from people who have been there to really help you get over the hump. So we are going to kick off part three. We're going to answer some more of the questions we are frequently asked on social media. And before we get started, I will let Erin introduce herself once again.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, for those of you who are just joining us, some of you may know me, some of you may know Nikki. I founded Well Balanced Accountants about 6 years ago. And one of the ways that we help accountants and accounting firms is specifically working with people who've been struggling to pass the CPA exam. So we compiled sort of our top 10 at most frequently asked questions. And what was cool about that is that many of them were the same questions that Nikki is getting all the time. So I'm primarily working with candidates on non-technical aspects of the exam. That's where you and I differ. I think we'd agree. You're working with folks on all kinds of things, but what's different from what I'm doing is that you do work with them on the technical side.
Right.
You know, working through problems and things like that. I leave that to you guys, to the experts, and I stick with things like planning out your CPA exam journey, executing on that plan, staying accountable, staying motivated, all of those things that sort of aren't covered on the technical aspects. So I'm excited for the topics that we're going to cover today. I think it's a unique hybrid. I'm interested in your perspective on some of these questions also.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned that because I find that candidates get so caught up in the technical that they forget about you really need a timeline to study for each section, that there are those moments where you're not going to want to study, and how do you pick yourself back up and get focused and pivot and make sure that you're still on task. And so the reason why I decided to dig into the technical piece is because, I mean, a lot of people know my struggle. If y'all don't, it took me 1,373 days to pass. So I checked every day off the calendar, like I was on Rikers Island or something. But even in the midst of going through all that, I had some super frustrating moments. I had some moments where I felt like, you know what, this probably is not for me because this is too much and I don't want to keep torturing myself. But then there was something in me that was like, no, if I made it this far, I can keep going. And so I started making my own notes and making my own flashcards to really help me get through the process. So that's the reason why I dig into the technical, is because I still have all of my notes, all of my study guides that I created for myself. And, I just want students to really understand the full circle aspect of the journey to becoming a CPA. So to your point, I love this hybrid, partnership that we have, because we're able to give them those different perspectives. And I mean, it's important to get all of the motivation and support that you can get, especially from people who have been on that journey already.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, I'm sure we tend to agree on stuff. We'll see if we have different perspectives on some of these topics. By the way, if you didn't catch our first two videos that we did, make sure to check those out. They're out there for you. So really juicy information in those two as well.
Yep.
All right. So this is a question I get all the time. How long do I need to study for whichever exam? So sort of fill in the blank. Yeah. What sort of advice do you give people about that?
So first and foremost, it depends on what you already know. And we touched on this briefly in, I think, module 2, session 2, of talking about the questions, where it really depends on what your starting point is, right? Mm-hmm. And so my example I tell candidates a lot is my experience with FAR. When I first started, I took FAR, and I'm working with a student right now who's like, well, I'm going to take FAR because I heard that it's the largest part. and it has the most information. And I feel like if I can get through that part, I can get through all the other ones before the time runs out. And that kind of makes sense. But then the other thing is don't allow other people's experiences to influence your journey and your timeline. Because the reason I started with FAR is because that was my day job for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So dealing with financial statements, with bonds and issuing debt and statement of cash flows, I did that every day for 5 years. And I've never worked in public accounting. I don't really care for audit. And so it didn't make sense for me to start there because it would have taken a lot more time and a lot more rigor for me to figure that out.
Yeah.
In the case of FAR, a lot of people are so intimidated by just the volume of the exam, which, I mean, we all know FAR is the largest piece, but it's also the biggest component of accounting. We're dealing with the financial statements, all of the transactions that go into that, the management's assessment of those statements. So there's a lot involved. So it makes sense for that to be the more voluminous part. It's pretty much the foundation of a business from an accounting and finance standpoint. So
Definitely.
It depends on where you are. If you work in public accounting or for a small accounting firm, then you might be more versed in tax or some of the, which is on reg, or you might be more versed in some of the audit issues where you're looking at evidence and audit reports and working with clients and compiling engagement letters. So it really depends on where you are now. If you are a new graduate, for example, and you don't have any experience, then the one piece of advice I would give is whatever order you decide to take the exams in, try to take FAR and then audit back to back, because again, the financial statements with FAR are the foundation of the business, and that's the management perspective of the financials. But once those financials are completed and published, if it's a public company, then now you have to get the auditor's perspective, right? So that's the entire content of the audit exam. So all of the sections of the exam have a lot of overlap, but FAR and audit tend to have the most correlation, if you will, as far as the content is concerned. So if you have work experience, start with where you're strong. If you're a general ledger accountant and you're going through month-end close and book and journal entries, FAR might make sense to you. But if you're an audit associate at a firm, then reg or audit might make sense. So it just depends on where you are.
Definitely. I have some sort of baseline numbers that I stick with when I'm looking at, whichever exam. So I love where you're looking, start with the place that you're comfortable. Now, for some candidates, I'll actually do the opposite of that and say, look, if I had to bet on you in Las Vegas, right, and I had to put my bottom dollar on which exam you were going to be able to pass, and you're a tax person, I'm going to bet on you passing reg. So perhaps you save that for last. So that's another strategy. There's all kinds of strategies out there, but ultimately it has to work for you. That's what people have to be empowered by the plan that they choose.
Right.
So that's more around the order that you're going to take the exams. So then once we've got that established, then it's about how long do I need for this first exam, right? How long? So as a baseline for BEC, I suggest like 4 to 5 weeks. It's the shortest.
I'd agree. Yeah.
Audit 5 to 6, reg 7 to 8, and FAR 8 to 10.
Yeah.
And then, so that's just a baseline, assuming you have no experience. And then we can go up or down from that. If you are more comfortable, maybe you don't need the full 10 weeks for FAR. You could, be on the lower side, closer to 8, maybe even less than that if you're really, like you were saying, Nikki, you're working in that every single day.
Right.
So we can make adjustments. Or if you're an auditor, if you're a tax person, I've got someone right now, she just finished tax busy season and she's going to go sit for reg, and she's going to do it in 3 weeks because this is her wheelhouse. This is what she's been doing for 5 years. So if she had 7 weeks, she'd be bored out of her mind. What's she going to do for 7 weeks? So I think there's adjustments. So those are sort of the baseline recommendations, and then we just go from there. Ultimately, I think the most important is that you feel comfortable with it, though.
Right. And I've heard that perspective too, where people say, well, I feel like if I start with the section that's going to challenge me the most, considering that the clock starts ticking, that 18-month NASBA clock starts ticking once you pass the first section, they'll say, well, I'll start with the hard part, because if I can pass the hard part, then I can pass the other ones within that window. So that's another strategy too. And to Erin's point, you just have to make sure that you do what works for you, because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of certified public accountants on the planet, and we all took multiple roads to get to where we are. Definitely. So
yeah,
just do what works for you.
Yep. All right, so let's assume we've taken the exam then. We've laid out a plan, we sat for the exam. If we use like now as an example, if I sit for an exam now, I'm probably going to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for my score. So one of the common questions that we get is, should I start studying immediately, or do I get to take the next 3 weeks off and wait for my score? What do I do? I think there's a lot of different strategies and thoughts around that too. So we could just throw some ideas out there, what we've done in the past.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one, or you want me?
Sure, I can start. I feel like this is the answer to everything. It depends. It depends on your situation, depends where you are. I think that's why it's really important from an early stage in your process to kind of map out when you're wanting to take exams. Set a goal for when you'd ideally like to be done. A lot of people use busy season as a marker for that. I'd like to be done before busy season or before next busy season, whatever that is. So if you've got that plan may dictate what you have to do, right? If you need to get started right away in order to have enough time to study for your next exam before the window closes. So that's, I think, again, just going back to really map this out. Don't just do them one at a time and sort of wing it on each one or what you're going to take next. We've got to have a plan. We've got to map it out from the very beginning. And then my other thought on that is, I think you got to just start doing something, because we get in the groove of studying. It's sort of like going to the gym, right? Once you get in the habit of it, it's good. It sort of just happens. You go, you're into it. It's a lot easier to just keep going than it is to stop and get started again. The momentum is sort of already in your favor. So I sort of think just keep going with it and then come back, right? If you end up not passing it, I think that's the big hang up, right? If I don't pass it, I want to take it again.
Right.
So it also will depend on your window. Now that's going away. So we'll be able to do continuous testing starting in 2020. I know it's about time, right? But in the meantime, if you may not be able to test for several months. For example, if you sit for this exam in October, even if you do find out that you didn't pass it, you can't sit for it again until January. So that's a long time where you could fit another exam in there. And I would probably recommend taking advantage of that time to study for and take another exam. So what are your thoughts? Do you have a general rule of thumb that you use, or what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, even when we study and we think we have a concept down, there's always an except for, or a but, or this is, in those cases, but sometimes this. So that's exactly where we are with this question. And had I got this question when I was studying, my answer would have been different. And that's because they've shortened the windows. So it used to be, if you take an exam in October, you might not get it till Thanksgiving, late November. So there was this 4, 5, 6 week waiting period where when I was studying, I felt like, look, I'm not going to wait that long for a score. I'm just going to move forward. But now that if you take an exam now, mid-October, then you might get your exam score by the end of the month. So they've definitely shortened that, which is to the benefit of the candidates. So my advice would be, first and foremost, definitely take a couple days to rest your brain and take a break, because I went as far as having an entire ritual on exam day, going to the testing center, from what I wore. Like, I didn't wear my glasses, I wore my contacts, because they wanted, like, take these off and inspect them. Like, I have cameras inside of them. I only wore my sweatpants or my yoga pants, because if you have pockets, that's extra checking. just so many different, I had like a checklist of,
I
I'm
love
not going to eat a big breakfast or a big dinner the night before because I don't want my stomach to be upset. I'm going to eat almonds and a banana and drink a little bit of water, not too much because that means I have to take a break and go to the bathroom. The clock is still running. I mean, I had all this like,
methodical.
yeah, type A planning. But now with this shortened window, I like to tell candidates, number one, like I said, take those couple days just to decompress and come down from the exam because there's a lot of anxiety. Your emotions are running high and you are just so anxious. Like, how did I do? I have a few weeks to wait. So first and foremost, take that break. Secondly, I would say go back to the AICPA blueprints. So if you just took FAR and then you're taking audit next, then I would say refer to the blueprints to see at a high level, what are some of the things you need to know for audit? So before you go knee deep into the studying, just get an idea of what you need to know and some of the content that's going to be thrown at you. And to your point, if you fail an exam in this window, you can't just turn around and take it again. So you do have that window of time where you might as well get another exam in. I mean, once that clock starts ticking, to your point, it's important to have that timeline because once that clock starts ticking,
Right.
you have to keep going. And once you get that momentum to say, you know what, I took the exam, I don't know what my score is, but I felt good. I know I did well. I'm going to move on to the next topic. So get an idea from the blueprints, what you're going to be looking at, what you need to be aware of, and then start studying for that exam. If you do fail, which it happens, and I actually just did a podcast where, people always say failure is not an option. And the podcast is failure is an option. And with the CPA exam, you have to budget for that in your 18-month window. So if you do fail the exam, you kind of still have the material fresh in your mind, but because you can't turn around and take it right behind when you failed, then it's to your benefit to use that extra window of time to try to get another exam in, because who's to say you won't have enough studying that you've done from this prior section that carries over to the new section, and you just have to brush up on a few topics and you can do well on that and then go back and do the retake. Right. So, I mean, again, had this been a couple years ago when I was still studying and those windows were extensive, then I would have said, you know what, But I love that. I feel like NASBA is really starting to listen to the candidates because a lot of the changes that have come have really been a result of, okay, we hear you. We have your feedback. We understand what your complaints and your pain points are. So I've seen this gradual evolution or improvement in the process that helps candidates along the way. So even with the windows going away and things like that, I think they really understand the need to simplify this as much as possible. Simplify the non-exam piece, the administrative piece as much as possible, because the exam itself is stressful enough. So we don't need any barriers to getting more CPAs in the profession.
No. And I suppose there's a chance that we could go into one of those delay periods again, whenever, I feel like that happens whenever we make significant changes. I wrote the test. When they make significant changes to the exam, they have to make sure that those changes are fair. So they've got to extend that score window, but even more so important that you take advantage of that time. That 18 months goes like that.
It does. It sounds like a long time.
Especially if you consider busy season in there. You've got big chunks of time that if you are working in public accounting or any sort of cyclical job where you've got these periods of time where you really realistically aren't studying maybe as much as you normally would.
Right.
That time goes so fast. So
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it depends. All that to say.
You know what? When in doubt, it depends on everybody's situation.
When in doubt, message us. Give us your specific.
Exactly. We are here to help you along the journey. So if you have a specific question that you would like me to answer or Aaron to answer, we're always on social media. I'm at Nick Winston CPA. Erin is at Well Balanced Accountants. It's spelled just like it sounds. It's also on her shirts. So we are definitely here to help y'all along the way. Happy to answer any questions that you might have
Definitely.
during your studies. So speaking of studying, let's pivot real quick and talk about finding that motivation. So let's say, Erin, you are a CPA candidate, and we've been talking about FAR. So let's pick BEC. BEC is my favorite section. So let's say you took BEC twice already, and you got a 72, and then you got a 73, and I mean, you're inching up, you're making progress, but you still are not to that 75. So clock is ticking on you, you're at risk of losing some credit. How are you going to stay motivated to stay the course and finally take BEC again?
It is not the greatest place to be. Let's just call it what it is, right? That is not a fun place. So I think it's important to just normalize that experience of this is not fun, right? This is not ideal. But with anything, whether you're setting a personal goal or a goal around the CPA exam, I think it's really important to have, and we've talked about this at length, that what for, right? What's that big thing that is pulling you forward, drawing you forward? Why are you doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
And that's why we recommend having those conversations early on in the process. When you've experienced a failure, it might be a really good time to go back and get present to why you were doing this in the first place. Think of all times, this is for me when it's the biggest and the loudest voice saying, you don't need to do this. Like, why are you doing this? You can give up. You can have a great career as an accountant. You don't need to be a CPA, right? All those sort of devilish voices in the back of our minds, they're going to be loud.
Yes.
In these moments, right? When it's uncomfortable to keep going forward. So I think it's really important in those moments to get clear on why you started this in the first place. I also recommend doing a little bit of reinvention around your relationship with that exam. So when something has beaten us multiple times, right? When it's got the upper hand, if you will, we start to almost feel like the underdog in that situation. And I think it's really important. A lot of the work that I'll do with my clients in that situation is helping them to take their power back, to not go into the exam feeling like, oh, that BEC, cost accounting, it's going to get me again, right? Because what we bring into that room with us is likely what we're going to get back.
Right.
We go in thinking it's going to get me, or it's this demon that I can't conquer. Likely that is going to be your experience. So we've got to reinvent that relationship and get back in charge. Like, this is the time. This is it's going to happen this time. And I'm going to make sure I, dot all my I's, cross all my T's, make sure I'm not cutting corners anywhere in my preparation. Yeah. So really spending that time to take your power back, get a good plan in place that will help you feel more prepared than ever going into that exam. I think that's really important to do that before you dive into the studying, because one of the biggest challenges with taking a retake is that a lot of it's stuff you've seen before in theory, right? So it's really easy to say, oh, I know this. I remember this from last time I saw it.
Yeah.
And you've got to go in with that beginner's mindset. But we've got to kind of address that baggage or the bad relationship you might have with that test first.
Yeah. That answer was spot on, Erin. I mean, I don't like to answer questions with questions, but this is probably the one where when somebody says, how do you stay motivated, studying after you fail multiple times, my response is, what is your why? Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? Why did you start this journey in the first place? And so, like you mentioned, it all boils down to going back to the beginning. You can't just wake up and say, oh, I'm going to start studying for the CPA. What is your motivation that has that fire burning in you? Like, I want to be a CPA. I have to get my license. What is that thing? And it's important to keep that in mind, because it's that thing that you're going to have to refer back to when you have to dig deep.
Yeah.
when you're looking for that mental fortitude to keep going. And then the other thing, I mentioned the score where, you were the student, you got a 72, then you
Yeah.
got a 73. You're making progress. So you've seen the material before. You might need to go back and peel back the layers of the topics to say, what part am I stumbling on?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it the multiple choice that are tripping me up? Or is it the simulations? Or BEC is that unique section that has the written communication.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing when it comes to the written communication? And to your point, it's almost like when we were little, when we watched cartoons, you had like the angel over here and the devil over here, and they're telling you two different things. You'll have this person saying, okay, I'm going to do this again. I got this time. But then you'll have this person like, no, this is not for me. My career is going fine. I don't need the CPA. And then that's the person that you want to kick to the curb, because that voice is not going to help you get closer to completion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of those thoughts. Like, you know what? I don't know if I want to keep torturing myself. I actually took FAR audit and BEC 3 times, and I took REG 4 times. And interestingly, sometimes you just have to take a step back, like you said, and just readjust. What am I doing wrong? What am I missing? That's the good thing about the score release when you fail, is that you get some of that feedback to say, was I weaker, stronger, or comparable? Okay, my automatic light activated. So you have to take that score release seriously to say, do I need to focus my studying on multiple choice, on the sims, on the written communications? But then looking at, how are you studying? Are you studying in front of the TV? Are you in a space that's not conducive to you really learning and retaining the information? Because that too can be a detractor. Are you using, like we talked about in the prior section, are you using a review course or resources that are aligned to how you study? If you're a visual learner, are you trying to read a bunch of text and books to figure it out? Or are you better suited watching a video of an explanation of a topic? So it's just really important that when you get to that point, if you're retaking the same exam over and over, take a look at your environment. Look at your study tactics, how much time are you putting in? Are you thinking an hour a day is enough? I have some students who are like, okay, I study maybe 2 hours, an hour or two during the week, and then they just study all day on the weekend. I mean, 6, 7, 8 hours on the weekend. Yeah. So just looking at that schedule, figuring out what works for you. And of course, what is your why? Why are you doing this? Is it because you can't get promoted at work until you get your license? Do you want to open up your own firm? Do you want to just create your own financial independence and drive the bus of your own career? It's those things that are going to keep you going through the process of those retakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, lots of information.
Yes.
I think that is our 3 questions for today that we're going to cover, but we've got some more exciting stuff coming in the next few videos. So want to make sure everybody stays tuned. We've got more suggestions, more thoughts coming your way. And you said you could follow us on social media and connect with us that way.
And we're doing this because of y'all, because these are the things that y'all have emailed me about, DM me about. Same with Erin, reached out to her about different things. So again, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, or if you are on your own journey and you're struggling a little bit, we are happy to help. So like Erin said, find us on social media. I'm at Nick Winston CPA. She's at Well Balanced Accountants.
Yeah.
And we will look forward to talking to y'all in the next video.
Yeah, we'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye. What's going on, everybody? If you liked that video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos just like that. We'll be sharing lots of tips and tricks designed to help you crush it on exam day.